Okay, let's explore how spinal structure varies from person to person, what that means for available range and backbends, and then how we can use those pieces to teach with a little bit more clarity and less frustration for us and for our students. So you've probably noticed this in your own body or in your students' bodies, but there's typically a lot of variation in backbend accessibility, right, from person to person, spine to spine throughout your students. For some people, they can access deeper backbends with ease, with comfort. For some people, even with joy in backbends. And for other people, we hit that stopping point much earlier, like no matter what we're doing in the practice. We work all the pieces, we build sequences that help to prepare the body, to build flexibility, mobility, even strength to support the poses. But sometimes the answer is really the spine itself, the actual bony structure. And I think understanding that can help change how we teach backbends and how we educate our students. So let's take a look at spinal anatomy and kind of how the regional differences between cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spine. We'll look at the spinous process and shape and how the angle affect extension and backbends, and then why backbend range varies so much between people. Let's also talk a little bit about how to distinguish that bony end range of motion, like from what's a flexibility limitation. And then what it means for how we cue and what to look for and expectations in our own bodies and then within our students. So I know, especially if we've had like a 200-hour training, our anatomy time can be pretty limited. So we've covered things like the different regions of the spine, right? The cervical, the thoracic, the lumbar, the sacrum, and the coccyx. And then maybe likely the natural curves in each section of the spine. What we might not have explored, I know I didn't in that training, and this is stuff I learned much later on, is really how differently each region moves and why. So each vertebra has a spinous process. It's that long bony projection that runs from the spine towards the back end of the body. If you put your hand on your back, you can often kind of feel those running up and down the center of the spine. And the angle and the length of those processes varies really significantly in each region of the spine. So in the lumbar spine, the spinous processes are thicker and they're more horizontal. They stack more on top of each other in general. Right? They have more room to move before they what's called approximate or come into contact with each other. Right? That's what happens in extension. In the thoracic spine, the spinous processes, they angle more steeply downward, overlapping almost like roof shingles on top of each other. So extension in this area, in that midsection of the spine, tends to be more limited. Right? It's not flexibility, it's structural. And because the shape and the space between each spinous process, right, they're just stacked more together. So they're going to come together more quickly. The rib cage attachment also adds another layer of stability in this region of the spine that just limits our thoracic mobility. And then cervical spine tends to extend really easily, which is why the neck often takes that path of least resistance in backbends, like I'm backbending, if we're not cueing specifically to that, because it just moves easily in that range. So what's happening at the end range? I think one of the key concepts here is to think about the bony end range versus the flexibility. So just take a minute to picture each section of the spine. Right? The spinous processes extend towards the back of the body, right? Different shapes in each section, stacking kind of like a ladder of different shapes. along the length of the spine. And in a back bend, as the spine moves into extension, those spinous processes move towards each other. And in the lumbar spine especially, they can approximate, come into direct contact. And when that happens, you've reached that bony end range. Right? There's no more room for the body to move in that direction. Right? So this isn't a flexibility limitation in someone's body. It's not something that changes more with practice, with more opening, with more breath, right? The bones come into contact, and that's the available range of motion for that person's spine. And here's what makes this so important for our teaching is that we can't see that from the outside. A student at their bony end range of motion and extension looks the same as the student who might have more range available, and it's flexibility, right? It's the muscle tissue that's stopping them. So if we keep cueing for more depth, then we're just asking for something that the structure isn't designed to give. So let's take it a step further, right? Each section of the spine is different, but where it gets really interesting, I think, and hopefully useful, is that the spinous processes vary really significantly between each person, meaning the shape, the length, the angle is really different on every body that you're looking at. And this is just normal anatomical variation. Some people have longer spinous processes, some people have a different angle, some people have shorter ones, right? So some are gonna touch sooner, some have more clearance. It's just really all in the way that those puzzle pieces fit together. Right? Some are gonna allow more movement than others. And this can be why I think about two students who have maybe same hamstring flexibility, same hip mobility, but they could have a totally different range of motion in cobra or bridge pose or upward facing dog. Right? One body's working with a bony limitation. Those spinous processes have met, they've touched. The other might have just different shape that allows more structural clearance. And they can go deeper into a back bend without compression. And I think this is really worth naming in our classes because we compare ourselves to each other, right? It's human nature. So when people understand that their spine has a really different architecture, it can shift that conversation from why can't I go deeper? What do I need to do? To this is the structure I'm working with in my body. And it gives them a lot of information on the why and what might be happening within their own individual body. So the question that can come up around this, and I think it's worth having some language around, because we don't know what's happening in the student's spine. We're not diagnosing anything, but we can observe. And we can notice what changes with cueing, what changes over time, and then those things that don't, right? So what we might pay attention to is, one, the quality of the sensation. Flexibility limitation tends to feel like stretch or muscular tension, right? When we've hit that end range of motion with flexibility. Bony end range of motion tends to feel more like a hard stop, like a wall, rather than just that stretch resistance. Right? Students might describe this as like pressure at the back of the spine, rather than a pull at the muscles, that soft tissue on the front. Okay. Also, how do people's bodies respond to like warmth and repetition and time? Right? Soft tissue restriction can shift, even just a little bit over time as the body warms, as the breath deepens. So bony limitation won't. It's the structure, it's what we're working to. So what's changing, what's shifting throughout a longer period of time or over a class, what's not? And then also, what's their response to refinement cues? Right? When we're offering good foundational cues like lengthening through the tailbone, core support, shoulder blade engagement, and nothing about the back bend shifts, that again might just be showing that available end range is bone versus muscle flexibility, soft tissue flexibility. Okay, so a few practical takeaways, right? Why it matters, why it helps, hopefully. Depth does not have to be the goal. Just sometimes hard to get across to all of our bodies when we want to do more. A well-organized back bend that honors the range of motion that we have can be really so much more useful than a deeper one that bypasses the structure. And this will apply to every back bend that we teach. Normalize variation. Teaching our students this, that each of us has a different structure of the skeleton, may help people to stop comparing, measuring themselves, or even trying to push their bodies into something that isn't available for their structure. We're all organized differently. And our refinement cues will also affect that. We can organize the foundation, support the breath, engage the right muscles. And when we've done all of that and the range doesn't change, then we've likely met that bony end range. I think language that we use here, especially language of invitation, can be really helpful. See if there's a little bit more available, respects the possibility that there might not be, versus go deeper in the back bend has a different expectation. The first invites exploration and noticing in the body. The second is often asking students maybe to push through where their body may or not be ready to go. So I love anatomy. I find it fascinating, but I recognize it's not everyone's passion. So it's why I offer these. My hope is that it helps support your teaching, your students' understanding of their bodies, their spines, in a whole new way. We're looking for how the regions of our spine can move with extension, right? So it helps us understand that. But also really the fact that each of our spines is so different, right? Structurally, the skeleton, that we can stop looking for what's wrong with our back bend and start examining how it shows up in our body. Is it flexibility? Is it bony end range of motion? So that you know what to look for with your students, and your students start to understand what to look for in their own bodies. Okay, if this is helpful, this whole deeper dive series is exactly this. Right? Things that we've learned along the way and are hoping to share with you, anatomy, alignment, just pieces of teaching that help a little bit. Okay, we'll see you in the next one.